Hello, hello. Good evening. Thank you for being here. I think that we are seeing what happens when we have a really nice weather evening in Tacoma, right? It has to be just a little less than perfectly nice for people to go and do other important things. So here we are, and thank you for being here. This is our first of our speaker series, and we are delighted to be launching this with Peter Jung. And we are celebrating Autism Awareness Month. So this is a well-timed, very pleased. I want to say I thank you very much this is the first time ever that we've done this, and I thank you to Rebecca and to Allison and the staff that are out there for all the planning that they've done. I'm going to give you a round of applause. There you go. You love that, sorry. I also want to say thank you to Magic Cabinet, which is the Ken Birdwell Foundation, for sponsoring us tonight. So thank you to Magic Cabinet. And finally to PAVE across the parking lot for their partnership in sharing Peter with us tonight. A couple logistics. I don't know if there's anyone who doesn't know this building very well, but the bathrooms are down the hall on the left. If for any reason we need to quickly exit, there are 2 exterior doors here. And if you haven't already, please help yourself. There are lots of little snacks in the back, so help yourself at any time. Note that Wonderful Branson is recording us this evening, so this can be shared at a later date. And all those people who are out in the sunshine will get to settle in and listen to Peter. Note that only those up here are going to be videotaped, so Peter's going to be on camera and no one else will be on camera. But when you ask your really great questions at the end, of course, it'll be on audio. One last important piece, this event and actually all of TACID programming relies on the generosity of community donations. So if you'd like to help support our work, please consider making a donation on our website, TACID.org, or we also have old school paper forms you can get from Allison, or use the QR code there. Okay, on to the main event. Peter Jung, thank you for being here again, works as a youth program specialist with PAVE and a lead facilitator at Aspiring Youth. He's an autistic self-advocate, guest lecturer at TCC, and he co-chairs the Pierce County Accessible Communities Advisory Committee. We first learned about Peter from our staff member Samantha, who attended a class where he was guest lecturing and came back to work and promptly said, "This guy is amazing." And we've since learned that he's got other fans too who share that opinion. So hopefully by the end of our time tonight, you will think so too. Speaking tonight on Thriving on the Spectrum, Supporting Autistic Social Advocacy. Here is Peter Jung.
So thank you all so much. Just really happy to be here at the inaugural TACID Community Speaker Series. We'll be talking about autistic socialization, autistic community, and what that looks like and why it's okay that that's different. This picture I have here is actually from one of my social skills groups where we all played Minecraft together. Usually I do Dungeons and Dragons, but I've tried Minecraft a few times and it's gone pretty well. And for one of our groups, they decided they wanted to make a building completely full of TNT and spent the entire 2 hours building a building full of TNT, and then at the very end we blew it up and crashed the server. So autistic community looks like crashing a server. So it can be very powerful and actually literally crash servers. In fact, that's actually quite common, I think. So again, just really happy to be here talking about this. And this is a very timely topic right now. There's a lot of really scary stuff in the news, happening politically around autistic people. And I think because of that, there's a lot of not great narratives about the idea of should autistic people even be part of larger community. So I'm going to say that yes, we should, and that it's cool if we're different. In fact, we should be different, and that's all okay. So I'm going to really break into it. It's going to be a little bit of a fire hose, and we'll have some Q&A time at the end. So jumping right in, our agenda. I'm going to introduce myself, my story, why I'm here, what led me to become kind of an expert on autistic socialization and autistic community building. Then I'm going to kind of break down the different ways we view disability, neurodivergence, and autism, because when we're talking about community, we need to think about how are we viewing disability? How does society view disability? Because if society has a pretty crappy view of disability, it's not going to approve of us forming our own communities. So we need to understand how society is approaching that. And then talk about the whole neurodivergence thing, neurodivergent, neurodiversity, neurotypical, yada, yada, yada. And then the different ways we understand autism. Then I'm going to talk about how do we actually support autistic socialization. I'm not going to give you a super easy answer on that because there isn't one. If there were like a nice list of 10, autistic social skills that we could just teach people to be better at talking with autistic people, I think that'd be great. But the reality is, if you met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And if you've seen one autistic friendship, you've seen one autistic friendship. They are all over the place. So I think it's better to have just some better guidelines. So I'm going to kind of talk about how that looks. Then I'm going to introduce a framework that I developed called Autistic Social Advocacy. And this came out of when I was working as a social skills coach. And I got an autism diagnosis and realized I was doing things wrong. Instead of trying to teach autistic kids to get along with normal society and fit in and doing these things, maybe I should help them learn how to advocate for each other, how to build community, and what that looks like. So I developed a framework, and I recently published a paper on that. I'm writing a book chapter on it. I've spoken all over about that. So I get to share that with you. Then we're going to bring it back to community and why this matters and why in this moment in history it's super important to support autistic community. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. So come up with some good questions, please. So a bit about me. This is a wonderful picture of me wearing a very cool cardigan that I think I got from like Temu or something, or Wish, I don't know. It was like $5 and it looks fantastic. So I am Peter Jung. I have autism and ADHD. Now, it's kind of interesting. I got my ADHD diagnosis when I was 6, and I actually don't know if let's get this off. I actually don't know if I have ADHD because, I am not impulsive. I'm not hyperactive. But in first grade, in a room full of really chaotic, crazy first graders, I just could not focus. There was so much going on. So a psychologist spent about 25 minutes with me and decided, yes, this is ADHD, he needs Ritalin, and the school needs to do this. And so I grew up thinking, wow, I am the worst ADHD person. This just doesn't make sense, but okay. So I grew up and I kind of read a book every day because I didn't have any friends and books were my friends and that was fine. And then in 6th grade, my grades started plummeting because teachers couldn't see, oh, he's reading a book a day, let's just pass him through. And around 2 or 3 months into 6th grade, my math teacher is writing on the board, and then she looks at me, and she sees me doing this, and says, hey, Peter, what did I just write? Peter, you need glasses. So suddenly I get glasses, suddenly everything comes into focus, school becomes so much easier, and my grades go up, and yeah, things are all right, except, the bullying, the isolation, books are my only friends. And then in 8th grade, I'm in detention for some reason, and this kid sits next to me and starts talking about Space Marines and Dungeons and Dragons and all these things. I'm like, what is this? This is cool. I'm gonna make friends with this guy. And this kid's like, cool, I'm gonna make friends with you. We're gonna play D&D together. So next thing I know, I'm playing D&D and I have friends and life's a little bit better. Now, flashback to college. I'm, kind of a complete disaster because I think a lot of autistic people are complete disasters in college. And my D&D group keeps me sane. Flash to my 20s, I'm an even worse disaster. My D&D group keeps me from becoming homeless, and vice versa. We all help each other out. And I get a couple degrees in social sciences, learn how to actually interact with people pretty well. And then I've been working in mental health, and they call me the angry autistic boy whisperer because 8 to 15-year-old angry autistic boys with like aggression issues and rage and all these things that just have a really hard time. They would just say, Peter, get him Peter. And suddenly these kids are doing great. And the kids would disclose to me, you're the only person that asks me questions that make sense. You're the only person that sees me for who I am. You're the only person that realizes when I'm in distress and understands what sets me off. I had kids finally open up to me and say, you know what, here's the thing I really wish I could do. I wish I could stop hurting my mom. And I'd say, okay, we'll work on that. And then they would. Kids that felt so isolated, had so much learned helplessness that they felt like they couldn't trust anyone. They could finally open up to me. So that was pretty cool. And it was pretty awesome. And then a buddy of mine who diagnoses autism for a living says, hey, Peter, you should probably get assessed for autism. And then I do. And then I am. And I found out that I am the sort of autism that really likes routine. And that's interesting. And it felt like I put glasses on again for the first time. Everything snapped into focus. And suddenly I wasn't this broken ADHD person. I was just kind of a routine, heavy, weird autistic person. And suddenly my life made sense. And I went to my supervisor and said, hey, I could use some accommodations. And my supervisor was like, yeah, that's funny. And some of my coworkers kind of started acting like they were in middle school, kind of bullying me, talk about me behind my back. And it just got kind of weird. I started unmasking a bit at work, and it did not fly. So I got really angry and said, yeah, I'm out, and started working in disability advocacy. And I've been here ever since. I've published a paper, I'm working on a book chapter, I've spoken at the American Psychological Association a couple of times, I've spoken in Japan, Canada, all over the US. Now I work at PAVE, where I make videos, write papers, write articles. So PAVE's pretty cool, they're just across the parking lot. They're a disability advocacy org, and my role there is I run a lot of their youth programming. So for example, some of the programs or articles I just did and talks I just did were on social media and disability and the safety risks there. Or what happens when someone calls the cops on your autistic kid, which I don't know if y'all have seen what happened in Idaho, but yeah, we need better ways to communicate with first responders. And thankfully in Tacoma, there's actually the DCR, there's the mock team, there's a HOPE team. There's a lot of ways you can divert into getting first responders who don't have guns and actually have like masters in social work and can actually do de-escalation work. And the problem is a lot of people don't know how to ask for that. So I'm working on stuff like that, and it's been really a lot of fun. So that's kind of my autism story. So when we're talking about autism, I think we need to start with talking about disability, because I've gotten into a lot of fights with people on Blue Sky, which seems to be what you do on Blue Sky, about is autism a disability? And I would argue, yes, it is. And if you think it's not, then you have some kind of internalized ableism that you need to work through. What makes it a disability can be, that's up for debate. But at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of intersectionality and a lot of work that needs to be done to really unite with other members of the disability community. So autism is a disability. And when we're talking about a disability, we need to understand, how does society view disability? Is disability a bad word? Is it a social trait? Is it a diagnosis? So that leads me to one of my favorite concepts, which is the models of disability. And the models of disability are these frameworks or lenses for viewing disability. So there's like a bajillion of them, but I'm only going to talk about 4. The first one is the moral model, which is like the Old Testament. You have sinned, and so now you are blind, or I am going to make you feeble-minded and do all these things because you have sinned. It views disability as a punishment for doing something awful. And yeah, that's very old school, medieval, whatever. Still kind of around. Then we have the medical model, which states, disability is a diagnosis and we should try to treat it, cure it, minimize it, which a lot of, autism, there are medical aspects to it. A lot of us have GI problems or develop neurological conditions. We would really like it if the medical industry would really try to work on that instead of genetic stuff. but they're not, and they just want to more or less minimize our autistic traits. So we learn how to mask. And when I'm talking about masking, I'm not talking about COVID masking. I'm talking about putting on a non-autistic face so you can fit in with non-autistics, which can be a very good skill. I don't want to say that's a bad skill, because that can help you hold down a job. That can help you get through a weird cocktail party. It's a useful skill to have. But if that's the only tool in your toolbox for socialization, you don't have an authentic toolbox for authentic socialization. You just are projecting and pretending you're something you're not, and you're gonna end up lonely. So, not a fan of the medical model, but I think it's better than the moral model. And then there's the social model, which says, hey, disability is a naturally occurring form of human diversity. If you live long enough, you'll end up disabled. And that's fine. We just need to work on making society more inclusive and better for people with disabilities. And also acknowledge that, there's a lot of people that are living in a world that's not designed for their well-being. So maybe there's some intersectionality here. So I like the social model a lot. And then we have the inspirational model, which is the sort of Facebook memification of disability. And thankfully, Facebook isn't as big as it used to be, and it's still massive. But I used to see all these kind of cheesy memes about people with disabilities with captions, and aren't they so inspirational? And look at this autistic person, he got a job. And yeah, it turns out the autistic person hates his job and really wishes he wouldn't be used as content. But the internet is I recently heard someone say, we got about 20 good years of internet, and now it's just a machine that delivers ads and scams, and that's kind of where we are. And that's also why I think it's important to be safe on the internet. So jumping into these a little bit deeper, let's talk about the moral model. And I love this image here. It's so good. It's like a medieval idea of how autism happens. And I don't know if you can quite see, there's this couple, and they're obviously ignoring their child because there's stuff happening down there, and they're very much in love. They're staring at each other. And then down here, you can see this little devil guy, and he's taking away this nice Christian baby and replacing it with a little demon baby. And according to the 1600s, that's how you get autism. You're so busy staring at each other that the devil comes and replaces your nice Christian baby with a weird autistic baby with little devil horns. I love this image. It's just so ridiculous. I kind of want to get it framed. It's just really goofy. But funniness aside, the moral model is trash. It is really horrible. And a lot of people like to think, oh, it doesn't exist. We're a civilized country. Yeah, have you talked to any anti-vaxxers lately? One of them's running the health department. So, yeah, and you always say like, oh, I have an autistic kid. Oh, well, did he get him vaccinated? You shouldn't have done that. Yeah, that's the moral model. So, yeah, and the problem with the moral model, one of the myriad problems with the moral model is how can you have community inclusion or socialization or any of that when you're viewed as a problem, as a curse? The best you'll get is pity inclusion, charity. That's not real. That's crap. So I don't like the moral model, but I do love this picture. Next up, we have the medical model. The medical model kind of says, hey, autism is a diagnosis and we should try to treat it. Now, if I've got GI issues because of my autism, yeah, I would like that treated. I sometimes have to take medicine to help my gut issues and keep me working well. That I would like more insight and research on to help deal with that. But a lot of my autistic traits, I don't want erased. I do like knowing how to fit in with neurotypicals. And in fact, I have 2 social science degrees, and so yeah, I paid a lot of money to learn how to do that. But it's still, I don't think that should be the end goal. That should be the end of the road. I think it's important for me to have my own community with my own people. That makes sense. But the medical model doesn't see that as a priority. They want to erase autism. They want to minimize autism. They want autism to be cured or not apparent. So I'm not really a big fan of the medical model, but I do want to highlight this image here, which a lot of the times in my talks, people ask, okay, so what exactly is autism? So this is actually how it's diagnosed. And it's looking for kind of 4 or 5 things. It's looking for social skills difficulties, which I do want to highlight a lot of the deficits that are seen with autism and social skills go away when autistics are interacting with other autistics. So we're not good at interacting with neurotypical people, but we're pretty good with talking with other autistics. So there's more and more studies coming out, and I love this, by the way, that are not having a deficit focus. They're asking, what's the difference between autistics and non-autistics? Not how are autistic people less than, how are autistic people different? So when you start asking, how are we different? You get some really interesting answers from the social skills piece. So there's social skills deficits, but then there's some other things. So the other things are kind of the stimming, the like flappy hands or the rocking, that whole thing. There's the fixation on routines. I'm a big routine guy. And when I found out I was autistic, I was moderate on the routine thing. And that was a thing where, like, if my routine gets messed up, I fall apart. I need my routine. So that's really important to me. And I really fall apart and shut down if I can't get my things done. So that is how it is disabling for me. If it snows and I can't go for my run, I can't go to work because I'm so messed up. And then there's hyperfixated interests. I've got a couple special interests. And then the whole sensory thing, being overstimulated or understimulated, sensory seeking or sensory avoidant, or sometimes both. There's certain sensations I love and certain sensations I cannot be around. But that's kind of how we diagnose autism. Oh, and it has to be impairing. So, medical model, not a big fan. Next up, we have social model, and this is another picture from one of my autism groups where they decided to go make their version of the Olympics, and it was better because their high jump thing went into lava and killed whoever was doing that, and they didn't tell them they were doing that, and it was pretty awesome. So, social model states, whereas the medical model wants to have autistic socialization that looks like neurotypical socialization, the social model says, screw it, figure out your own socialization, figure out what works. You're a diverse community, and we want to welcome that and say that's valid, that's normal within its own context. And a big part of what autistic community should do is it should connect people. It should create opportunities for peer advocacy and peer support, and build a healthier identity. Because a lot of autistics hate their autism, and that's not a good place to be, headwise. So really focus on those healthy identities and that peer support. And also highlight the intersectionality between other marginalized groups, because it highlights, a lot of autistics, we're living in a world that's not designed for our well-being. Well, guess what? There's a lot of people who live in that world, especially in this day and age. So highlighting that we're all kind of in this together, and that we all need to be sitting at the same table and making space for each other at this table. And this is something that I wish were better. There have been a lot of times where I've gone to like diversity conferences and I've self-identified as autistic, and I asked, like, is anyone else here autistic? No, there's no other disabled people. And it's like, what are we doing? If you're not making space for us at the table, if this place isn't even wheelchair accessible, then what are you doing? So it's frustrating. And so ultimately the goal is larger inclusivity, but also autistics having their own spaces. So finally, we have the inspirational model. Just please stop. This is just terrible. I love this picture because it's really cute. They're very much into each other, and she's just the look on her face is just amazing. It's really cute. But then you have the like and share equals respect and all this stuff. Don't do this. It's terrible. Instead, here's what I wish people would do. If you want to find something inspirational about an autistic person, ask them. We will talk for hours about the fan fiction that's like 80 chapters that we've written and been working on for the past 5 years. No one cares about that, but that's something we're proud of. So freaking just talk to us instead of making stupid memes. So Talked about the models, and that will inform things later. I'm not going to give you a quiz, don't worry. But we'll break down neurodiversity, because just some terms. Neurodiversity means brains are different, and that's okay. There's brains that have bipolar, brains that have ADHD, brains that have autism, brains that have this and that, and then brains that don't have anything. All this is a form of diversity, neurodiversity. Then we have neurodivergent, which means everything but the neurotypical, everything but the typically functioning brain. So the ADHD, the bipolar, all these things. That's neurodivergent. Where this gets tricky is when people say neurodivergent, they mean autism. It's a euphemism. And I think this is actually indicative of what's happening in the larger world. We autistics are in the spotlight, and we never asked for this. We've got the friggin' Eye of Sauron staring at us and wanting to put us on lists and do all these things. Autistics generally don't like attention. We don't like being in the spotlight, yet here we are. And meanwhile, all the other people who are neurodivergent, they're floundering, they're struggling, they're not getting services. I know so many ADHD people that are really struggling because just getting the meds that work for them is like pulling teeth. So no one's happy, it's broken, no one's doing what should be done. So I'd like neurodivergent to be used to describe what is actually neurodivergent, but we'll see. So then we have neurominority. This is a term I read in a paper recently, really like it, just highlights that neurodivergent people are a minority identity and should be seen as being marginalized and facing challenges. And that's important, and we need to be okay with that. And then neurotypical refers to a brain that doesn't have a diagnosis, is normally functioning, yada, yada, yada. So now that we have a little bit of vocabulary, let's talk about autism. So first, I want to highlight this little cute fellow here. I was talking with one of my Dungeons & Dragons social skills groups, and the kids were talking about the autism symbols. So they really don't like the blue puzzle piece. Don't light it up blue, don't donate to Autism Speaks, their medical model E, they're terrible. So the kids didn't like the puzzle piece because there's just a lot of baggage there. But they really were pretty cool with the infinity symbol. That was fine. But then they told me about this little fellow here who is just called the autism creature. So Gen Z has imparted on me that the autism creature is their autism mascot. So I wanted to share that with you. So hopefully people will know this is what at least my little sliver of Gen Z wants as their mascot. So now that we've cleared up this little fellow is autistic, well, look at him, he's very clearly autistic, I guess, I don't know. It's important to ask, is autism a disability? Is it a form of diversity? Is it a brain disorder? Is it difficult to live with? Yes. Autism is incredibly complicated, and there are entire courses and books that are thicker than my brain or my skull that are written about autism. So it is very complex, and it's a lot of things. But at the end of the day, autistics are struggling, and that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about one of the reasons why they're struggling. They're alone and they're isolated. Autistics, we have a lower quality of life. We are overrepresented in the justice system. We have a lot of health problems and are underemployed. We make a lot less money. And we actually have shorter lifespans. It's getting better. It used to be autistics, I read a study in the UK that said autistics lifespans are 19 years shorter than neurotypical lifespans, and thought like, wow, that's a lot. Well, then they updated it and said, it's actually 6 years shorter. I'm like, well, that's a movement in the right direction, but why? And it turns out the old study was from like the 1960s, where the people they were studying were people that were living in institutions and in really bad situations. So yeah, it made sense. They were really struggling. More recent studies, we're getting better at detecting autism. It's not that autism has suddenly, exploded, people are getting more autism. We're just learning to pick up on it, so we're starting to see it a lot more. And we're starting to see people that live significantly longer, have more full lifespans. Honestly, I would like to see us living longer than the neurotypicals, but we'll see. But I think, that is a big part of it. Yet at the same time, we got to get that quality of life situation doing better. And a big part of that is so many of the autistics I talk to are lonely. They're isolated. They don't have community. They're cut off. And that's so normalized for autists because they think, oh, you're autistic? Yeah, you just, hang out at home and don't have friends. And that is seen as what we do. And that's horrible. I hate that. So it just is so frustrating because there's all these stereotypes of how autistics should be and that are limiting, and people don't want to hang out with autistics. Yet autistics are awesome. We're very creative. We think outside the box really well. We have unique talents, a strong sense of justice. We can pick up on things really well. And we're just really, really quirky and neat. One person described it as autistic riz, and I hate that term, but it is real. But at the same time, there's a lot of autistics that are really struggling socially. They don't know how to fit in for a number of reasons. And the people that are struggling the most need the most love. I think that's really important to acknowledge. It's really easy to love the popular kid. It's really hard to love the loner and the weirdo. So I think that's where we need to be stepping up, because it's the loner and the weirdo that's the most isolated. They're the most at risk. So we need to be building a bigger table. So let's talk about how do we actually support autistic socialization. First, don't try for normal. I think this is a problem with parents and autistics. A lot of autistics want a normal friendship. They want a normal relationship. They want this and that. Don't try for that. Try for connection. And what I mean by that is, parents come up to me and say, oh, my kid's in your group. I want him to work on eye contact. And I'll be like, okay, what else? Well, I want this. Okay, what else? I want this. Okay, what else? Well, what I really want is for him to have friends. Okay, let's start there. So try for connection, not normal. And a lot of people want normal. Normal's stupid. Try for connection. Don't have a set system of rules. I think a lot of autistics grow up watching TV and think, these are the rules for friendship that will work for me, and then they don't. Figure out your own system, but also this system needs to have boundaries and compromise baked into it. And a big problem is a lot of autistics are taught compliance, which is not very good, because then they grow up and they don't know how to say no. And I have known so many autistics who are 19, 20, get their own place, and someone says, I want to do this, and they can't say no. And it's resulted in some really, really bad things. So teaching boundaries is critical and really essential. And that's part of, self-advocacy, is being able to say, I'm not comfortable with this, you need to leave, or I will call the cops. I had one client, he got housing. Amazing. In 3 weeks, he got an apartment paid for. That's unheard of. Most housing wait lists are super long. This kid got it in 3 weeks. Within a month, it was being used as a drug house because people kept on inviting themselves over and then doing drugs. There was an infant, there was drugs everywhere, and he was getting robbed, mugged. He didn't know how to kick these people out. And I said, you just need to do it. And he's like, I don't know how. So teaching them boundaries is really, really important. They'll figure out all the other stuff later. Really, really important part is role modeling. We need better peer advocates and role modeling. I'm glad that Square Pegs is here, because talk about peer advocates and role modeling. Having more people that can be those healthy autistic role models is so critical, because right now the two autistics I see in the news are Kanye West and Elon Musk. And recently, apparently Kanye's, Ye is autistic, and both of them have been doing Nazi stuff lately, so that's not good. I don't like that. So we really could use some better role models that aren't like Nazis and Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. He's creepy, very, very creepy. So need some better role models. I think another important part is the idea of scaffolding. And what I mean by scaffolding is neurotypical people, they get a lot of scaffolding socially. Ways for them to just interact with others and figure out how to do that. So I'm talking about recess, I'm talking about lunch, I'm talking about prom, I'm talking about softball. I'm talking about all these opportunities that are baked into growing up neurotypical, where you can learn to socialize. Well, autistic people are busy hanging out in the classroom during lunch because they get bullied, or they're in the library, or they don't go to prom because they don't know how to ask people out, or they can't do sports. So they don't get those opportunities to have that social scaffolding where they can learn interaction. Because ultimately, these things are a skill, and learning how to interact with your fellow autistics is something you just got to work on. And a lot of the times, that's not supported. So I started looking at, where are the autistic spaces? Where are those? I found two that are pretty awesome. The first is anime conventions. And I love people watching at anime conventions because you see autistic teen girls that are happy. Most of the time when I see teen autistic girls, they are miserable. And to see them at an anime con, surrounded by all their weird friends, dressed up as Sailor Moon or Demon Slayer or whatever the big animes are now, and just having the time of their lives, that's so cool because they are being autistic, they're being weird, and they're having community and getting to feel like they're not alone. The other one I like is gaming stores, where you see all these people playing Magic the Gathering together, staring at these little cards, not making eye contact, discussing rules, and building community, and that's really cool too. I think another autistic space for socialization is the internet, and that's a great space. Actually, the internet is dangerous. Be careful. The internet is amazing. It's a lifeline for me. A lot of my friends are almost entirely online. I have quite a few friends that I talk with every day, and I've never met them. Partially because, one of them's living in Ukraine, one of them's living in Colombia, but the other part of it is even if they were local, I probably wouldn't see them. I've got friends that live 25 minutes away, and I've only seen them twice in real life. And these are people I talk to constantly. So the internet and online friendships are really important, but you got to be safe. And I actually did a talk at PAVE about disability, social media, and safety that I highly recommend. Should be up on the YouTube channel soon. I think another kind of issue is that sometimes there just are difficulties. For people with higher support needs, it can be harder. You might have a lot of internalized ableism where you kind of hate your autism, or you might have some pretty significant challenges. And a big part is the crisis. A lot of autistics can go into crisis. I worked with the Angry Autistic Boys for 8 years. A lot of them didn't have friends because they would have meltdowns a couple times a week where they're punching holes in the wall. Yeah, no one wants to hang out with someone who's going berserk and punching holes in the wall. That is a serious problem for trying to have a social circle. That doesn't mean they don't deserve it. It means you have to be really solutions focused. You got to be really creative, and you have to try really hard. And what I found to help them build community is find people who are ride or die for that kid. Usually grandparents were a big one. Family, start there. Church. Finding those community spaces where they could start having connections that understood, that were patient, and then start there, work from there. And what I found, when they started having community, they started having a better sense of well-being. And the crisis and the escalations, they actually reduced. And I think just by knowing you're not alone and you got people who love you, you're in a better headspace. Life is a bit less stressful. So finding community and being really solutions focused and finding a way to have these people at the table is so important. And then I think the other piece of it is acknowledging that autism is a marginalized group, and there's a lot of different marginalized groups that are really struggling. And so finding the shared experience there and learning from them. And actually, let me see the next slide. Yes, cool. So I'm going to be talking about my Autistic Social Advocacy framework real soon. And what was really helpful in developing this was I stayed up till 3 a.m. having like a 14-hour conversation with a gay autistic therapist who specializes in working with autistic gays about how the queer community does social advocacy. and how the autistic community could be doing it. And it was so fascinating. And so I learned a lot from him, and then I started looking at my own social groups where I created, when COVID happened, we switched over to the chat app Discord, and I started looking at how the kids were advocating for each other. So taking this idea of, I'm not actually reinventing the wheel on anything, or maybe I'm reinventing the wheel. I'm just looking at how do autistics advocate for each other? What's important for social advocacy to happen? And how can we break it down into actual skills that we can teach autistic kids? So I developed this framework. And I do apologize for that yellow one there. It's very hard to see, but I'll read them off as I go down. This framework is the Autistic Social Advocacy Framework. Recently published it in a journal. I'm writing a book chapter. It's something I really want people to start thinking about when they're teaching social skills. Because right now, a lot of social skills classes are focused just on fitting in, not advocating, not building community. So the first three skills are self and peer advocacy, safety, navigating conflicting access needs, and then the next three are autistic normalization, autistic contextualization, and autistic joy. So the first three are skills. The second three are ways of building identity. So the first, self and peer advocacy. For something called the Autistic Social Advocacy thing, yeah, you want to know how to do advocacy. You want to be good at it. You want to be good at communicating your needs, communicating your boundaries, communicating all this stuff effectively. And then you need to be able to advocate for your peers effectively. A lot of autistics have had people advocate for us in a way that is condescending and infantilizing. So really good peer advocacy looks at what we actually need, communicates with us, checks in with us, and actually supports us. So if you want to build good community, you got to have the ability to advocate for everyone there authentically. Next up, we have safety. You can't build community if you don't feel safe. And there are so many definitions of safety, and I could just go on and on about it, so I won't. Just, you got to feel safe, and you got to learn how to be safe and respect others' safety. So that's really important. You're not going to build community if it's not safe. Then we have the conflicting access needs piece. So this is kind of a really challenging one. Sometimes you will have manifestations of autism that are in direct conflict with each other. And how do you come together and be solutions focused and say, I want everyone to have a voice. I want everyone to be welcome. So the example I see all the time is I run these Dungeons and Dragons groups. And there's always some kid who's really, really noise sensitive. He needs everything to be really quiet and really calm and not too loud. And then there's the other kid who's really just excited to be there. He likes to yell a lot. He likes to bounce off the walls and is just full of energy. And they're sitting next to each other. In about 5 minutes, if this isn't solved, they're going to stab each other's eyes out with pencils. So I need to come up with a solution. Wait, no, I don't need to come up with a solution. They need to come up with a solution. And I need to make sure that they're being fair. So I challenge them to figure it out, because I don't want an adult to come in and say, yes, I'm going to fix this for you. No, I want to say, hey, how are you guys going to solve this? This isn't working. Let's come up with a solution and we'll see how it goes, and we'll keep trying, because I want to empower them to resolve these access needs. And the reason this is important is we don't want to gatekeep. We want everyone to be welcome at the table, because the minute we start saying your type of autism isn't welcome here, we're missing out. We're doing it wrong. So we need to be as inclusive as we can be and as accepting of others' differences as we can be. It's really important, and it's really hard, and you need to be solutions focused. So I think that's really critical, making sure everyone has a seat at the table. Next, we have the identity themed ones. And these ones, each one of these is actually kind of fighting against one of those problematic models I described: the moral model, the medical model, and the inspirational model. So the First one is autistic normalization. And this is just saying, yeah, my autism is a trait. It'd be like if someone called me four eyes, I'd be like, good job, you notice I'm wearing glasses. It's very perceptive of you. I would not be offended. If someone said, wow, you're totally autisming out, I'm like, yeah, I guess I am. I don't see it as a bad thing. A lot of people do. A lot of people hate their autism and they use it to hurt themselves. They're doing all the work for society for them, and it's just, don't. I think in Game of Thrones, Tyrion said, if you wear your disability like armor, they can't hurt you. So wear it, be proud of it, and all the people that would see it as a deficit, they can't use it against you. Next is autistic contextualization, and this one's kind of interesting. This one goes against the medical model, which would say, oh, Peter is doing this thing, it's a rhythmic, sensory, blah, 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 for me stimming. So I don't really do the hand flapping. What I do, the way I stim, is I'll take my fingers and kind of do this, and I call it pulling out the cobwebs, because sometimes my brain's kind of foggy. It's hard to think. And if I do this, it's like pulling cobwebs out of my head, and suddenly I can think a bit more clearly. So now I have an alternative narrative to something that is ultimately pathologizing my experience. And I can share it with others and be like, yeah, I like to do this. It helps me focus. So I've had so many times where medical providers have explained my autistic experience to me, and it really ticks me off. I call it ABA-splaining. I can't stand it. And yet I'm also a poet, and I'm very good with metaphors. So having something like, yeah, I'm pulling the cobwebs out of my brain so I can think more clearly, people are like, wow, that's kind of cool. I usually just have to go spend like $8 at Starbucks to get a venti thing to clear the cobwebs out. I'm like, nah, I could just do it with my fingers for free. And so, yeah, I haven't been to Starbucks in a long time because I could just pull the cobwebs out. And so it becomes kind of a cool thing. I mean, it becomes my story, not theirs. My identity, not their pathologization. Pathologization? Yeah, I think that's the word. And then the last one is autistic joy. Autism is difficult to live with. I know it. I've been autistic my whole life, and there have been times where I've hated my brain. Just could not stand it. But there's also times where there's a silver lining. There's fun stuff. And people who have a silver lining mindset around disability tend to be more resilient. They tend to be more successful because they have that little bit of hope. So my autistic joy is my spouse and I both have a special interest of bugs. And so every now and then they'll run inside and be like, Peter, there's a cool bug out in the garden. And I'll run down and we'll go stare at a bug for 10 minutes. And there's no subscription. There's no ads. We just get like 10 minutes of quality bug. And like the neurotypicals don't get this. They have to watch like Netflix and Apple TV for their entertainment. And we just watch bugs and it's really fun. And I love it. So that's the joy. So I can hold on to those tidbits of joy that make me realize, yeah, my brain sucks today, but there's also bug, and bug is fun. So these are the 6 autistic social advocacy skills, and people who can promote these, teach these, and empower kids and adults to do this can start forming autistic community. And I think it is so critical for autistics to really start working towards this. So, let's talk about community. Why is all this important? Well, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes an even bigger village to raise an autistic child, but a lot of the times, the parents of the autistic child find that their village has left them. And this is not good. This is bad. They need more supports, not less. So, helping people find their community that understands is so critical. And then also normalizing that neurotypical people can do it. So in my gaming group that I'm actually still friends with, those people I started playing D&D with, I'm still buddies with them. A couple of them are neurotypical, and they've got incredible autistic social skills. They're really good at interacting with me. And by having those autistic social skills, I think they're just better people. They're more empathic, they're more understanding, they're more gentle, they're more patient. One of them just became a dad, and I see just how kind and patient and understanding he is. And that's the same kindness and patience and understanding he showed to me growing up. And now, he's got a kid that's got his own stuff going on. And I get to see, like, you know what? He helped raise me. Now I get to be the cool uncle, and it's really cool. So being able to do that is so empowering. I think the other reason community is really important is the more people are struggling, the more alone they are. So you got to find the people who are struggling and help them out. A lot of the times they're dealing with learned helplessness. They've tried again and again and again and just ended up being burned. And so you got to understand sometimes there's a wall of scar tissue. So you got to be really gentle and really patient. And I think one of the ways to really make this work is community of peers, of people who are autistic, who get it. And unfortunately, this is not seen as a priority for services. And this really, really frustrates me. I look at a lot of the services out there that work with autistic people, and then I'll ask, like, okay, so how many autistics do you have on staff? Oh, none. Really? And that's okay? And yes, that is okay. And it boggles the mind. But then I remember what happened with me in my experience. And I recently went to a support group for mental health providers that were autistic. I was the only one that was public at work about my autism. And this was after I'd left and gone to work in disability advocacy. The rest were hiding it because they knew what would happen. And so service providers need to step up. They need to start hiring more autistics, and not just one. Autistic people are like cats for so many reasons, but one of the things that is true of cats is you don't just want to get one cat. Because if you have one cat, you've got a cat that's pretending to be a person. If you have two cats, they can do cat stuff. You see them wrestling and cleaning each other and like doing all the weird cat stuff. Autistic employees are the same way. You got to get a couple so they can do weird autistic stuff together. Hopefully they're the sorts of autistics that like each other. I've had autistics I just don't get. Actually, no. Have I met autistics I don't like? No, I actually like almost every autistic I've met. I like autistic people. They're fun. So services need to prioritize hiring autistics, supporting autistics, and looking for autistic excellence. There's this term I kind of came up with called lived expertise. There's lived experience. A lot of people have lived experience. I've lived experience of being autistic, yeah, sure. But I also have lived expertise. I'm really good at being autistic. I have gone through a lot of challenges and a lot of failures and learned how to pick myself back up, learn from them, and move on and teach things to others. And this is something I call lived expertise. And there are a lot of autistics out there who have figured out how to thrive. So find those people and hire them. And if you're someone who's seeking out services, say like, okay, so how many autistics do you have on staff? And if they say 0, laugh at them. Point and laugh. Yeah. Oh, there'll be time for Q&A at the end. Yeah. And why this is important is nothing about us without us. This is the philosophy of like, hey, if you're going to be having conversations about us, we need to have a space at the table. And for those of you who have been following politics, House Bill 1541 passed a couple years ago, or maybe last year. And that's the bill that says, hey, if you've got a government task force or committee that deals with a specific population, you need to have that population represented. So if it's good enough for government, it should be good enough for services. But the big thing that I see standing in the way is siloification, which I don't think that's a word, but I like it, so I'm going to use it. The autism world is full of 3 big silos, and these silos are the medical and services silo, the parent silo, and the advocacy silo. And these are these 3 kind of communities that aren't really talking to each other very well, and that means they're not able to collaborate very well. So the first silo is the medical and services silo, and these are people that are, at the end of the day, they're making money off autism, which they're providing services. It's important, but they are the gatekeepers to services. They're the services providers, and usually they're adhering to a medical model philosophy that wants to reduce symptomology, do this, do that, and usually there aren't a lot of autistic voices present. That needs to change. I worked in mental health for 8 years, so I can code switch to medical really well. I talk with providers all the time, and I'm very good at it. That's not what I am anymore, but I know how to speak that language. I think we need to make it safer for more autistic providers to come out as autistic so they can be open about what they need at work and how they can support their autistic clients. So that's why I went from the medical people. The parent silo is incredibly diverse. I've met parents that almost make me want to cry because they are so ride or die for their autistic kid, and they love their autistic kid so much, and it's the most beautiful thing in the world. And then I've also met some autistic parents that I've had to call CPS on. So I've seen the gamut. And unfortunately, there is a subsection of a lot of parents that is very tragedy focused. And what I mean by tragedy, raising a kid with a disability is hard. And sometimes it can be traumatic. And it's okay that it's traumatic. And it's okay to talk about that. But a lot of them have this narrative of my autistic child is a tragedy. And there's something I used to do, and I haven't done it in a long time because I don't want to be depressed. I would type into Google, my autistic son, and then look at what the auto-suggested, like autofill things were. And it was like, my autistic son is terrible. My autistic son is the reason I got divorced. My autistic son hates me. My autistic son is, just nothing good. And so that's what Google is saying the narrative is. So I think there's space to talk about trauma. I think it's important to talk about trauma, but the minute you start viewing someone as a tragedy, bad things happen. So I think we need to be doing a better job of acknowledging the trauma, supporting the trauma, and fighting against the tragedy, because no one is a tragedy, and you can never see anyone as a tragedy. And then finally, there's the autism advocacy silo, that's where I hang out most of the time. And I like this silo. It's pretty good. The problem I see here is a lot of the big voices here are trauma focused. All they have to say is how much autism sucks and how difficult it is, and it's just so hard because of this and this and this, and that's okay. Can we please have some joy? I imagine you're 14, you got an autism diagnosis, you're looking at the internet and all these voices and looking for some hope and finding nothing but despair. You're not going to feel very good about this diagnosis. So teaching autistics how to feel good about themselves is essential, and we in the autism advocacy silo need to be doing this better. But at the same time, I think we also need more people that can walk between the silos. I can walk between the medical silo and the autism advocacy silo and start breaking those walls down, because I know how to talk to providers. I know parents who have autism, who are parents of autistic kids. They can break down those barriers too. I don't think I've ever met a parent of an autistic kid who is autistic and also an autism provider. Someday I will, and I look forward to meeting that magical unicorn and learning from them. But we need more people that can walk between the silos, tear those walls down, because we all need to be working together for what's coming. So why does all this matter? Final slide, and then it's Q&A. Well, healthy socialization turns into community. Community turns into supports, a support network, and a support network turns into a safety net. That was my story. I had my little gaming community in middle school that in high school and young adulthood turned into a support network. We'd help each other out with stuff. We'd fix each other's computers, buy each other food, do stuff so we wouldn't starve. And then when we were in our 20s and all over the place, we became safety nets so we didn't end up homeless. So services will fail. Community is a lot more robust at being a safety net. And as more and more things are being slashed, we need more robust safety nets. And the best way to build that is healthy socialization and autistic-led community. We're also living in an era where there's an epidemic of loneliness, and I think autistic people are affected by it more. It was kind of weird after COVID. Everyone was socially awkward, and I think a lot of autistic people were really happy about that because everyone was kind of struggling. But then after like a year, all the neurotypical people, they kind of found their footing, and autistic people are still like, wait, no, I finally felt like I belonged. Everyone was into chess for a couple months. I miss chess. There's also, the importance of role modeling and, peer support. Being able to be those autistic success stories that can reach out to other autistics and say like, yeah, let me help out. Let me show you the way. I think there is so much wisdom in autistic elders, autistic people who have lived a long time and can teach the young people, here's how you get old, because a lot of us are scared. And then there's also this history of isolation, institutionalization, segregation. Washington still has institutions. They still lock people up. And when you have something like that existing, autistic segregation just becomes so much easier to justify. So that's just the makeup of Washington State. But when you build stronger community, more inclusive community, you show to everyone that you're inclusive. When people see that, hey, these kind of weird autistic people are sitting at the table, you're showing that you can make a table bigger, welcome more people to the table. So it is beneficial for everyone. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of dark clouds on the horizon. So we all need to be working together so we can all get through this. So thank you. Questions? Oh, yeah.
For accessibility, we're going to use a mic, please. I'll pass it to you.
Okay, this is a question. Okay, they need to hire more autistics.
Yeah.
Is it legal to ask someone in an interview, do you have a disability? I think it's not.
So that's actually a really interesting question. I think on one side, it is the person's ability to say, I don't feel comfortable disclosing it. I don't think it's legal to ask for disability.
So then how do they hire more autistics?
Well, first off, by saying, hey, we prioritize on the job listing, saying we're going to prioritize hiring neurodivergent people.
Okay.
Specifically making that part of the thing, saying we want, and also creating job descriptions that make sense for autistic people. Yeah. So I am a huge believer in peer counseling. I think that's a wonderful role for autistics because you don't need a college degree for it. There are certifications. It's a lot more manageable. And the type of the work is you're trying to build the connection. So creating more roles that autistics can be successful in and highlighting, we value this, we're looking for this, and we're prioritizing people.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions?
How do you recognize, though, autism's a large spectrum of challenges. And how do you recognize that people, though, will have different needs based on where you are on the autism spectrum? Because everybody will be different with this condition.
That's a really good question. And I wish I could just I probably could go and Google and find it, but I don't want to spend time trying to find it. There was a picture that showed, instead of it being a spectrum of really autistic to not autistic at all, it was kind of like a pie chart that showed differing levels. So this person has really high routine needs, or this person has really difficult social situations. So highlighting that there's a bunch of different areas is a good first step. I think the next step is, acknowledging people have differing levels to which they are disabled, and that's okay. So what I think is really important when we're having those discussions is what I call throwing a rope down. So in a lot of talks I've done, my co-facilitator for my D&D groups is a lot more visibly autistic than I am. She's got a lot more support needs. She really struggles with a lot of things. I have invited her to do talks with me, just to normalize that someone with her ability and whatnot is welcome and is on the stage with me. So creating space for people like that is really important. And I think the best people to do that are autistic people who have a place on the stage and can say, yeah, this is cool, but I want this other person to be here with me. And demanding that. I do actually want to, is there someone with a question? Oh, yeah.
You were talking about people who are autistic have sometimes other medical situations as well, like seizures or other neurological. How could I, as a person within my community, and I am neurologically based, help an autistic not be so frustrated, like de-escalate, so that they wouldn't be harming themselves or going out and getting angry at the world?
That is, de-escalation and talking about autistic frustration. I think that's a really big conversation. I think what's really important is just to listen and realize this is not a conversation that's going to happen right now. This is a conversation that's going to be going on for a long time. And right now we're having a bad time, but maybe in a week we'll be in a better headspace and we can talk about it. And then maybe the week after that, we can talk about it a little bit more and talk about it a little bit more and figure out what led to this escalation, where these things are coming from. Because a lot of people think, oh yeah, this meltdown just happened out of the blue. No, this meltdown started 3 hours ago and has been simmering under the surface. And the person kind of knew that something was wrong. And so it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of people who know what it's like. So just reaching out to the autism community, being patient, listening, and realizing that this is not going to be an easy fix. But you got to be solutions focused. And a big part of being solutions focused is endurance. I do want to give a shout out to Square Pegs over here. They are an autism social meetup group that is really big in Seattle, but there's a Pierce County chapter and we've got someone there from them. And so I'm a huge fan of Square Pegs. Glad to see them here. Any more questions?
Your comment about Elon Musk and Kanye West was really disturbing. I'm wondering if there are positive role models? Like, that's my short version.
A lot of people will be kind of disturbed by this just because of the roles he's played. Anthony Hopkins is autistic. Delightful person, also Silence of the Lambs. He plays really good villains. He's one of my favorite actors. He's great in everything he's in, but usually he doesn't play nice people. He plays like cannibals and serial killers and stuff, but he is a wonderful autistic role model. I think Gene Hackman was autistic. May he rest in peace. And there's a number of other that I'm not coming up with. God, who else? Oh yeah, Greta Thunberg, yes. And Bill Gates, maybe, although people are kind of on the fence on. Say what? Bill Gates recently said, if I had grown up in this day and age, I would have been diagnosed with autism. So he suspects he is. So there are some pretty good role models out there. But I really like to highlight the ones that make sense for you, the ones in your community. And sometimes that means, finding ones in TV shows you like, if anyone here watches anime, Laios from Dungeon Meshi is absolutely autistic. There's various characters. There's a TV show called Monster High, I think, that had a lot of weird kind of monster characters. And there was a Boogie Girl character who's autistic. And, she stims and she has a little bracelet and doesn't like loud noises. So I watched a couple clips and it was really, really cool, because her friends like her. She's part of the community and that's awesome. So I think things on some level are getting better, but we just need to keep on fighting for it. Other questions?
Okay, I have one. That's really loud, sorry. As an autistic person who's employed, what can I tell my employer to help support me in my support needs? Like, I'm pretty well versed in them, but in the future, if I have an employer who doesn't understand me, what specific things could you point to or resources do you have?
Yeah, really good question. So I had the good fortune of working with a research team from Australia that developed a tool for autistics to communicate their support needs. And so this, I think it was from University of Perth or something like that. What it was this curriculum that was given to HR, the supervisor, the autistics mentor, like their work mentor, and the autistic person, where it wasn't long. It was like maybe a 30-minute long little class, but they talked about specific challenges with autism. And so everyone had the same language. Everyone had the same way of understanding it. So the autistic person could talk to their manager and say, hey, I'm dealing with this specific thing. And the manager would know exactly what it was. So finding out standardization is really cool. I would love to see that curriculum adopted, but if not, coming out as autistic and having those conversations is scary. It can cost you your job, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You know, I think the best thing you can do is get to know your supervisor before they hire you and figure out, do I actually trust this person? Unfortunately, it's a trust economy. So really suss out the organization, make sure you know that the person's not going to laugh at you. I don't recommend it. It's horrible. Yeah.
Okay, if you, let's say you're a mechanical engineer and you tell them you're autistic, with the Americans with Disabilities Act, can they fire you because you are?
You know, we're an at-will employment state, so they can kind of do whatever they want.
Because one thing that I realized, my story is I did not become a developmental disabilities administration case manager until I was 43. I failed over and over and over again, and it clicked. I was above average. I did it for 22 years. And in a lot of ways, it doesn't make sense that someone with autism could do that job because I suck at computers. And if you want predictability, you don't want to be a case manager. We say at DDA, it only takes one phone call to change your entire month. And I thrived in it for 22 years.
You know,
and it's amazing that I did, and it almost didn't happen 4 times. So I realized that, okay, Robert Everett Dehan did not need accommodations to be a case manager at DDA. Other people do, and that was my job to get them. But I realized how lucky I was. And it almost didn't happen. I didn't get there until I was 43, and I kept feeling over and over again. When I was at DDA 2 years, my mom said to my stepdad, Eldon, Robert found something. So I realized how lucky I was, but I realized other people need accommodations, and that was my job to get them. But yeah. But as far as the job description, this isn't what an autism person is supposed to do. You know, I suck at computers.
No, I actually want to highlight something that you say, that you're talking about that's really interesting. There's this kind of stereotype that there's kind of 2 jobs for autistic people. Yeah. You're either folding clothes or working for Microsoft as a programmer. You know, the question is, are you a computer nerd or not? Well, I was a really good case manager, and I was driving all over Pierce County and doing, you know, case management team meetings, doing all this stuff, and I was really good at it. Doing de-escalation in really high intensity situations. It turns out I'm an adrenaline junkie. So, you know, doing this stuff is great, but there was a specific ask for certain things that really messed with my routine, that made my routine very hard to do. And I needed some accommodation around that, and that was just not in alignment with what they were willing to do. I think they could have had people supporting me, and just acknowledgement that, hey, from this time to this time, we don't bug Peter. Someone else will do it. Peter will explain what the needs are, and then he'll deal with it in the morning. But that would have been complicated. And so I think there are a lot of jobs that autistics can do. And I think it's really important to have the role models who have done that jobs, but also the people that can highlight how does the accommodation happen. So There could be the rock stars that don't need any accommodation at all, and that's great, that's wonderful. But that's not tenable for a lot of us that do need accommodation. Yeah. Yeah. And lucky's good, but at the same time, it's really important to acknowledge that we need to be, again, making the table bigger and creating blueprints. Mm-hmm. No, and it's something where after I got my autism diagnosis, I experienced kind of, they call it autistic regression, where it's like, I've never worn a corset, but I imagine it's like having to wear a corset for like 10 years, and then you finally take it off, and you can breathe, and you're gasping, and you're like, oh my God, this is what it's like to have my lungs filled up. And then someone says, hey, can you put the corset back on? And you say, yeah, no. So I now, for a lot of the jobs that I'm working at, if I'm looking at applying for a new job, I want to be able to have a flexible schedule. I want to be able to do hybrid work and work from home a lot. I need that now. Didn't used to need it, but I realized for my autistic well-being and being able to do all my weird routine habits, that's really necessary. And thankfully, I've been lucky enough to find employers that really like the work I do, so they let me be remote. But at the same time, it has been an escalating need, and it's still fine. You know, I actually do like coming to the office sometimes, but just don't demand it constantly. Yes.
First of all, thank you. This has been really, really great. I was wondering, you talked a little bit about just in the spirit of community, but also joy, and just thinking about the role that TACID plays in community. You mentioned a couple things where you will find a lot of autistic, or a couple places you will see a lot of autistic people, whether it be game stores or conventions. And is there something that you or your peers or people you talk about wish that there were more spaces for? And kind of second part to that question, or what do you think it is about those places that make them so comfortable and joyful for autistic people?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think, like, where are the gaps? Well, I know a lot of autistics that don't like anime, don't like geek culture, don't like playing board games, so they're struggling. Oftentimes, they find online communities that can be pretty good fits, but then sometimes those online communities stop being safe. So I think that is the internet was an amazing boon for autistic people, but now, a big problem I see is a lot of hate groups kind of infiltrating communities and then becoming very hostile towards like LGBT people and women and things like that. So it's not that there's more communities, it's that the communities are becoming fewer and fewer. I think also IRL things, real life events, are greatly diminished post-COVID. So working on rebuilding those is a huge necessity. I think another area to really work on is, I kind of call it the missing middle. So if you know anything about civil engineering and urban planning, there's this concept called the missing middle, where in urban planning, you either have single family households or big, super dense apartments. Well, that's not very great. Where's the middle? The duplexes, the triplexes, the townhouses, where you have like mid-density housing. So that's something that, is a problem in a lot of cities. Well, it's also a problem in autism services. You either have, you get 40 minutes with a therapist every other week, and that's not very helpful, or you get 40 hours of ABA. Well, what about the people that just need, 2 hours of coaching a week and 2 hours of just someone to talk them through just getting their bills done, getting some chores done, executive functioning support, helping them with some minor coaching. And that is a huge lack. And there's one organization in Seattle called Enigma, and they are that missing middle. So they do a lot of social skills stuff for adults, and I love it. The guy who runs it is brilliant, but they're also waitlisted to all hell. So getting more missing middle services that provide a few hours of support, They don't need anything intensive, but a few hours. And something I've heard time and time again, people will call me and say, I'm not in crisis. Give me 6 more months like this, and I will be. And I have to say, I'm sorry, there's nothing. So, all right, 5 till we end up. Any more questions?
I'd just like to say one thing. It's not a question.
More of a comment. Not a question, it's a comment.
So it's been a long time since I've felt as engaged by any speaker. I would say the last time was a TED Talk. Thank you very much for being here tonight, Peter.
Thank you, thank you. All right. Well, with that, I think that's if no one else has any questions, that's a great thing to end on. All right, well, thank you all very much. As far as I know, this will be up on YouTube, and I'm really excited about that. And thank you for listening to me for an hour and a half.